Welcome to this week's edition of World Crisis Radio. This is Webster Tarpley reporting from Washington, D.C. First of all, a program note. My lecture on the Russian fleets of 1863 and how Tsar Alexander II helped Abraham Lincoln save the Union in that hour of dire peril. That broadcast was, of course, put on C-SPAN television in the past couple of weeks, but it's now in the running on the C-SPAN website. That is to say, C-SPAN video.org. Anyway, you just go to C-SPAN and you get to it. The C-SPAN video library. And if you just scroll down a little bit, you'll see that we have the most watched programs of recent days. And I'm very happy to say that the speech that I gave at the National Press Club on September 24th, Russia's participation in the U.S. Civil War, is now available there as number 8, the 8th most popular of all of the most watched. In other words, of the people now going to the C-SPAN website, I believe, yes, the website, it is the 8th most popular. It is the most popular of anything appearing on C-SPAN 3. And the only other historical one is one about Mamie Eisenhower, which counts as a C-SPAN special. So I thank all of you who have clicked in there and helped to project this up to the 8th position. And I ask you now, if you have a minute during the weekend, go to C-SPAN, go to the C-SPAN video library, take a look at the most watched, click over to the second set of those, and you will see that my talk is there, number 8. Just click on it, watch it, review it, rehear it if you have time. And this I ask because it would be highly advisable for this to be rebroadcast, especially to dissipate the unfortunate effect of the Perino study, right? The Perino study of Lincoln, which does not accord the necessary emphasis to the critical Russian alliance, which is what made Lincoln's victory in the Civil War possible. Without that, you would have had Britain and France coming in on the side of the Confederacy in a very, very difficult situation. Slavery, most likely, would have dominated in at least much of the Western Hemisphere. Certainly from the Mason-Dixon line to the South Pole, that would likely have been all slave at the by about 1870. So that didn't happen thanks to the Russian fleet. So Russia's participation. If you want to just go to C-SPAN, click on Tarpley, and then look for Russia, you can get the same thing. So that's C-SPAN. That's a light here. In this unfortunate overall situation. Although, we've got now some positive news. The U.S. election, obviously a very mixed bag. How could it be otherwise? But positive results, to be sure. First of all, we're now referring to all the mayoral elections, the Virginia, New Jersey elections, the New York City elections, and so forth. First thing we can say is the Tea Party has been repudiated everywhere. All important races, the Tea Party has lost. The only possible exception is Attorney General in Virginia, which is now locked in a too-close-to-call recount. There, the Tea Party fanatic, the social bigot, Obenshine, had a big lead early in the evening, but it didn't last. And as the Northern Virginia suburbs came in, it became neck and neck, and it's now a virtual tie. There will be a recount that may take weeks or even months before the winner is known. So as of tonight, as of today, we can say the Tea Party fanatics were turned back everywhere. They were repudiated. They were rebuffed. They were routed. The other thing we can say is that there is a definite left turn in mass psychology. We'll go through this in a minute, but when we get a trade unionist in Boston, an ultra-left in New York, a Clintonista in Virginia, and so on down the line, apart from the hideous features of some of these individuals, to be sure, that's a left turn. In other words, it means that the forces of reaction, the Koch brothers, the National Rifle Association, the Dement machine, the forces of Cruz, and so forth, the so-called libertarians, the reactionaries of Rand Paul and Ron Paul, all of them are defeated and in disarray. In particular, inside the Republican Party, we've now got open war, and it's this four-way division of the Republicans. You'll recall it now. The legions of greed, the Wall Street and corporate money men, the social bigots, they like to call themselves Christian evangelicals. I don't see anything Christian about them. The warmongers, the neocons, and then the libertarians, obviously starting with the stoners, right, the people interested in narcotics, but then getting into this very ugly right-wing anarchist anti-government phenomenon that we've seen in the government shutdown and the attempt to bankrupt the United States with the debt ceiling. There's now war among these, and in particular, it's that the legions of greed look at the libertarian anarchists and say, you almost bankrupted my predatory derivatives interests, right? If you had pulled your shenanigans with the debt ceiling and bankrupted the United States, I'd be wearing a barrel because I would have lost on all my shorts and my longs, and that would have been an upheaval. So the legions of greed look at these right-wing anarchists of the Cruz, Dement, and related types, Amash, whatever his name is, Rand Paul even. They look at them as an existential threat. In other words, they're destroying the racket of these predatory money men, and there's not much to choose between them, is there? They're both forces of chaos. Perhaps the anarchists, the chaos element is a little bit more immediate. The other thing is that the legions of greed are not happy with the social bigots. This came to the fore in Virginia. The money people in Northern Virginia and elsewhere looked at Cuccinelli, social bigot, and said, look, you're going to be running around worrying about abortion and gays and contraception and other issues. We don't care about that. Those are rube bait. That's to get the yokels on board, but that's not really what we're about. We're about union busting, tax cuts for the rich, deregulation, and so forth. And they look at Cuccinelli and they say, your record is wanting. You've wasted too much time on the rube bait. In other words, you've somehow become confused. The rube bait is the cover story for the reactionary union busting and related policies. It's not a goal in itself. So a lot of them refuse to give money to Cuccinelli. He goes down to defeat, and this was a rather interesting result. Now, the other thing, so this means the Republican Party in big trouble, because if that four-way alliance can't be maintained, the Republicans collapse. They've got to have the money element and the social bigot element. The social bigots are their ground troops. If they don't have them, then they can't win elections. The warmongers, not enough. The stoners and anarchists, also not enough. So it's very definitely a tremendous crisis for the Republican Party. Could lead to their destruction. We'll be watching. Back in a minute. Welcome back to World Crisis Radio. Asking you once again, kindly please go to C-SPAN website on the internet. Click on, feed in Tarpley, Russia, and you will get to this speech of mine from the Press Club, 24th of September, about the Russian fleets. Click on that, watch it for a while. It's now number 8 in overall popularity on the website, and if it goes higher, a good chance it might get rebroadcast to the to be able to refute the, I think, distorted picture that's being offered by Perino and certainly other existing portrayals of these events on C-SPAN. So the Brand X history needs to be countered. So please don't forget that. So repudiation of the Tea Party. Tea Party defeated everywhere. Left turn in mass psychology. Now, I'd be the first one to say, look at de Blasio in New York, right? This is not a real step forward. It's a faker who operates under left cover, and more explicit left cover by far than Obama ever did, right? By way over left. But, of course, a faker controlled by Soros, Morgan Stanley, Goldman Sachs, you name it. But to the average person, this is a left turn. So certainly E.J. Dionne in the Washington Post of yesterday, a nudge to the left. The center of gravity in American politics moved left in Tuesday's off-year election. No doubt about it. And in terms of mass psychology, certainly that's true. The reactionary Republican machine is crumbling. The legions of greed are at war with the libertarian stoner anarchist faction who want to destroy the government. And in another fundamental way, the legions of greed are at war with the social bigots who don't want to pay enough attention to the money needs of the money men. They want to go out chasing their ideological chimeras about homosexuality and abortion, right? Guns, God, gays, and abortion, right? Those great wedge issues. That's what they are. That's what those guys want to do. The money men say, no, pay attention to our money needs. So that can blow them up, and we're hoping that this will now play itself out. Already, it's like the German army in 1918. There's a stab-in-the-back legend among the Cuccinelli reactionary Tea Party supporters. They say, the money men let us down. They should have given us more money. We could have won. Dubious, right? This is the Virginia Republican Party who ran what can only be described as a war on women. We'll try to get to that in a minute. Now, there are also, the other, of course, the big thing, the tax Wall Street Party is on the map. Randy Credico, the tax Wall Street Party in New York City, went all the way to November, got 12,000 votes back in on September 10th in the Democratic Party primary. This time, of course, it's more difficult to get people to experiment with a protest vote when they're facing this ogre Laude. Laude scared a lot of people, right? The prospect of another 4 years of dictatorship of finance capital as we've had it under Giuliani and then under Bloomberg. That was scary. So Credico was cut down to about 650, 670 votes. But if you notice, he defeated 5 other candidates who were on the ballot, and he just about tied the Socialist Workers' Party. And the Socialist Workers' Party has been there for 75 years, right? Since 1938, there's been the SWP, right? The Trotskyists of the Fourth International, and they were just slightly ahead of Credico. So this adds up to programmatically planting the flag, making the point. Tax Wall Street Party is here. He was going with a 0.5% tax on stock, bond, and above all, derivative turnover. This would have more than doubled the city's income, made possible the entire social reform program that de Blasio talked about, but will not deliver. We're bracing ourselves already for the first betrayals by de Blasio. The other thing now is, in terms of this this overall shift, there's now a bifurcation becoming visible in the Democratic Party, and this is exactly what I told you to look for. The goal is destroy the reactionary Republicans in place. play upon the division between the traditional reactionaries and the outright fascists, right? The fascists are the ones who want to destroy the government, bankrupt the government, and so forth. The reactionaries, of course, would be the money men who simply want to continue their racket while increasing their take. One interesting fact, the new mayor of Boston, Martin Walsh, is a crat. He's a trade union bureaucrat. So here we see here's the coverage from the Washington Post also on Thursday. Voters in New York City and Boston on Tuesday chose two Democratic mayoral candidates who represent archetypes of the party's activist government, labor-dominated past. Well, maybe the world, has gotten old and now it's becoming young again. Both mayors-elect ran on a platform of economic opportunity and fairness, an issue that resonates more among Democrats at a national level in the wake of the Great Recession. New York's Bill de Blasio and Boston's Martin Walsh share a strain of economic populism with some of the party's more liberal members in Washington, like Senators Elizabeth Warren, D. Mass, and Sherrod Brown, D. Ohio. You get the idea. They're looking at something different. Populist, pro-labor Dems. Notice, this is not the Democratic Party of Wall Street servant Obama, not the party of Schumer, New York Senator, not the party of Durbin, and so on down the line, right? It's not the plutocratic Wall Street corporate wing. No. You can see already the fault lines, the fissures. Destroy the Republican Party, and the Democratic Party flies apart. That's the goal. That's the only way I see out of a historical blind alley, which is otherwise quite tragic for this country and for the world. And, of course, we don't have it. What do we have? We don't have resources. We're lucky if we have car fare on some days. But we can still do it because what you're trying to do is catalyze the movements, use the power of ideas to catalyze the movements of masses in motion and large institutions. Just adjust them a couple of degrees because you're not telling them to do something that they don't want to do. You're trying to get them to do things they say they want to do, but in effect, do not do. So, number one, destroy the Republican Party in place. Number two, promote the split of the Democrats into populist pro-labor on the one side, plutocratic pro-Wall Street on the other. And we're going into a 2015 upsurge. As I predicted in June of this year at the New York Left Forum, the 7-year itch, an upsurge is coming in 2014, 2015. We have it from the New Statesman of London. Welcome back to World Crisis Radio. Webster Tarpley here in Washington, D.C. I hope I footnoted everything. I was quoting there from the Washington Post of Thursday, November 7, 2013. I don't want to be a plagiarist like Rand Paul. It looks like his pal there, the Southern Avenger, had been larding some of his books with some quotes that had been lifted from various places. But of course, little Rand won't fire any of those people. He's already had to fire two people for being too close to the what can we say, white supremacist wing of things. All right, let's look at some of these interesting details. Boston, we basically said it. The new mayor of Boston is a trade union official. He's Guy Walsh. He's pledged to a $15 minimum wage in the city of Boston. How about that? Now, de Blasio, we've gone through this. We paid attention to New York City. De Blasio is a creature of Soros, Morgan Stanley, Goldman Sachs. Interestingly enough, de Blasio's family is a CIA family. De Blasio's uncle was some kind of a professor who was assigned to handle the Shah of Iran. I think he co-wrote or ghost-wrote a book for the Shah. His father also up to his neck in the intelligence community. So he is somebody who a faker who operates under left cover. His real name is Warren Wilhelm. There's a little town, Sant'Agata, in Italy that now thinks that they've got a scion who's the mayor of New York. Unfortunately, it's Warren Wilhelm. So he's really not what even the name says, right? He's like Herbert Fromm, Willy Brandt, or Gary Hartpence. Gary Hart. You get the idea. It's only a question of time before de Blasio begins attacking his own base. He never promised to end stop and frisk. Never. And that was then brought up, right, after the fact. His pre-K tax is chicken feed. It won't even be levied on a lot of the millionaires who winter in Palm Beach and summer in the Caribbean and then winter in New York or whatever, however the hell they do it. So it's only a question of time, right? And remember, de Blasio came out and told the business community, I am a fiscal conservative. So he's a faker, but of course he's got to be a chameleon and look like he operates under left cover. Across the river in Jersey, here we have this Damon Runyon character, right? A goon, a thug. The media are groveling and propitiating this clown unbelievably, right? He's now, he's like, they're determined not to present him for what he is. He's not a moderate. He's a union buster. His first effort was to try to destroy the teachers' union and completely bust them and bust up the public employees. He also vetoed a bill to raise the minimum wage in New Jersey to $8.50 an hour. Boston is headed for $15 an hour. This bum Christie says, no, $8.50 is too much. I'm vetoing it. Now, that was overridden with a ballot issue in this precise election that we've just had. 60-40. It's the same arithmetic of the Kasich loss on his union-busting stuff in Ohio a couple of years ago. So the other one, the unforgivable thing, right? You figure, Republican, he's going to be a union buster, he's going to be a wage gouger for sure, he's a Republican. How about building the tunnel under the Hudson River? You want development, you want jobs, you want business, you want pork, you want a rake-off, sure, but not Christie. In order to pander to the reactionary Tea Party, he said, no, we're not going to build it. There was federal money. He refused federal money. So he looks like he took federal money on the Medicare expansion. Thank God for small mercies. But he torpedoed, he destroyed this absolutely necessary new tunnel under the Hudson River. That's just unforgivable. The media are groveling for this thug. Notice also that the election he just had was a designer election. He organized 2 weeks earlier, he organized the by-election, the special election to replace Senator Lautenberg, who had died in office. So there was an election 2 weeks ago for Democrats and the black community. That was Cory Booker, mayor of Newark, getting elected senator. The left-wingers turned out for that one. And now this one was considered, the one this week, this was an election for reactionary Republicans, and that was for Christie. So when they say the Latinos voted for Christie, it means the tiny portion of the Latino community that chose to come out in this second election, right, much reduced, I'm sure, compared to the first one, they voted for Christie. So he stacked the deck by having two elections, a designer election, one election designed to attract Democrats, the second election designed to attract his reactionary Republicans. So this guy is a fraud. He's a Potemkin candidate. And, of course, New Jersey, the Garden State answer to Hermann Goering, Reichsmarschall, head of the Luftwaffe in World War II. And the idea is that he's supposed to be an austerity enforcer, right? He's going to bully you and goon you and thug you until you quit. He likes to pick on women. He's a bully. Scratch a bully, you're going to find a coward. He's dirty as all hell. We now have this book from the two authors, Halperin and Heilemann. Why did Mitt Romney not pick this goon to be vice presidential candidate? Because Christie was a running dog for Bernie Madoff. He was a lobbyist for the trade association of which Bernie Madoff was president, and Christie's job was to convince the New Jersey legislature in Trenton that there should be no financial watchdog agency looking at financial fraud of precisely the type that Bernie Madoff was practicing. So this guy runs interference for Wall Street. He's a running dog, a goon for these predators, derivatives, mongers, hedge fund hyenas, and all the rest. And there are other stories about his excessive spending, his first-class flights, feeding on the public trough, and all of that. Then we get to Virginia, and of course here it's the Republican Party, right, of Bob McDonnell. Now that the election is over, Bob McDonnell, the current Republican governor, may well be indicted on bribery, gifts that he took from a businessman. This, unfortunately, this cannot be described other than this is the Republican Party that wanted to impose a transvaginal ultrasound on women who wanted to get an abortion. And Cuccinelli was out in front on all of those. So Cuccinelli, a vindictive, narrow-minded, nasty, social bigot, and, of course, running against him, the genial Terry McAuliffe, right? A picaresque thief, a prince of thieves. Now that Bob Strauss of the Democratic National Committee is no longer with us, I think the title of Prince of Thieves may well go to Terry McAuliffe, but genial, sunny. He challenged the National Rifle Association, defeated them. The lieutenant governor was a Jeremiah, the Republican candidate, a black preacher with all kinds of strange ideas. The Democrats won that one, and as I say, the only one left over is the Attorney General. Alabama, the Tea Party defeated in Alabama between Bradley Byrne, the winner, a reactionary, and Dean Young, a real extremist, right? So you get the idea. It's a pattern. Now, if you listen to Terry McAuliffe's acceptance speech, victory speech, you'll now know that I was right last time. The Hillary Clinton line is common ground, bipartisanship. In other words, Hillary is now reverting to the pathetic line of Obama in 2008. I can be bipartisan. I can overcome the bipartisan divide. I can work across the aisle. We don't want that. We want the Republican Party destroyed. Hey, Democrats, you were telling us until yesterday that they're extremists, that they're fanatics, that they're anarchists. They're all that. And then you want to turn around and say, and we're going to haggle away your economic rights to Social Security and Medicare in order to please these bums and allow them to continue on. Sorry, no common ground. Destroy these reactionaries. Don't send them lifelines by compromise. Welcome back to World Crisis Radio. This is Webster Tarpley in Washington, D.C. Now, changing gears, we want to continue our coverage that we've been doing in the last several weeks on the very important, I think, world-changing visit, the North American tour of Sister Agnes Mariam of the Cross from that monastery of St. James in Kara, Syria. And people will remember I got to know Sister Agnes Mariam about 2 years ago, November 2011, when she hosted an international delegation, including Thierry Maison of France and myself and others from Italy, Belgium, many other countries, to come there and see the truth of what was going on. And she gave us the proper orientation to understand the truth of these matters. So Sister Agnes Mariam is now in the United States, and we wanted to get the first of what I hope will be weekly reports from Paul LaRudie of the Syria Solidarity Movement. This is where you can follow what Sister Agnes Mariam is doing. It's Syria Solidarity Movement on the Internet. There's a calendar there. Got to look a little bit to find it, but be persistent. You're going to see that it's there, where she's going to be, and what days. So I want to welcome Paul LaRudie and ask him, can you bring us up to speed on what this tour is like? I believe she's been on the road in the U.S. for about a week now. Please tell us everything.
Yes, that's right, Webster. Thanks for inviting me on your show, and I'd be very happy to provide weekly updates on what's happening. I guess some of what's happened is expected and some isn't. We're trying to provide reports as much as we can get them from the venues about what has happened. But I can tell you that the first 2 days, She was at the Tear Down the Walls conference in Tucson, Arizona, where she addressed the entire assembly of more than 1,000 persons, I think.
Mm-hmm.
On the first night, they invited her to be one of the keynote speakers. And partly as a result of that, I guess, her workshop was attended by more than 400 people. And they were very enthusiastic about it. It was really an amazing event and reception for her. Now, admittedly, there were a couple of, maybe half a dozen people from the Syrian American Council, which were opposed to having her speak in North America or, frankly, anywhere else. And on their website, they have put together a script and a petition, and the script is to be used by anyone who wants to help them shut down Mother Agnes Mariam. You call the venue and you make libelous and false statements about her and how terrible it is that this venue is hosting her, and in other words, you intimidate. This is the idea. Get as many people as possible to call and intimidate the venue and shut it down. So there were about half a dozen of them there, but I have to say that the rest of the people there did not respond well to that, and if anything, the rest of the people shut them down rather than responding by shutting down.
Let me ask you now, the Syrian American Council, I suppose that's the Free Syrian Army and people like this. What I would wonder is there an element of, you say intimidation by these would-be censors, right, and dictators of public information and opinion. How far do they seem ready to go, right? Because we've seen what they do in Syria, right? They stop at nothing, right? Are they threatening violence in the United States?
There may be one or two people. We actually had, I would say probably only one person in the Bay Area who actually threatened violence, and then later he more or less apologized. He didn't actually commit any violence, as far as I know. I have to say that we have tried to control the situation at the events a little bit, just be a little security conscious and keep the format with, for example, written questions, so that we don't allow someone up to make a monologue that dominates the event and this kind of thing. And that's worked quite well so far. And some of the events have had nobody of that from the Syrian American Council. But they almost invariably have made phone calls to the venues, almost every single one. And they can go right to our website, as can you and your listeners, to find that information there. And thank you for suggesting that they go there. And these are open events. We welcome them, no matter how skeptical they are at these events, to hear Mother Agnes and hopefully to give her talk a fair chance and to answer some of their questions and respond to their concerns and criticism and all that sort of thing. But so far, I can't say that they have actually exercised violent options, and I'm certainly hopeful that will remain the case.
All right, but we just want to remember, who we're dealing with, right? What they do over there, they want to do it someplace else. All right, so far we've had the Tear Down the Walls event in Tucson, Arizona. Has she gone on? Where is she now? And what does next week look like?
Yes, she's just actually finishing up in San Francisco, and it was a wonderful tour here in San Francisco. We had a total of, I think, 6 events and an equal number of in studio or on the phone interviews, And so it's been quite productive. In the first event that she did in San Francisco, there were about 300 people attending. Most of the events have had larger numbers than were expected. I mean, 100 people at a retirement community. That's the one largest attendances that they've had in memory there,
mm-hmm.
and so it's really good to see this. And I would say that last night was, relatively speaking, the most hostile audience that she's had yet. Lots of her critics came last night, but it was done very respectfully in the end.
And where was this located? Was this an institution, a campus?
It was at the Oakland Peace Center, which is on the grounds of the First Christian Church in Oakland. The pastor got one of those people calling in saying that he should shut it down, and this is a pastor in the middle of Oakland who's accustomed to this kind of thing, and he just basically said, "I don't have any time for this." That's it. So
I don't know if you can trace this back, but one of the problems, of course, is that we have these so-called leftists. We have broadcasters. We have all kinds of people who claim to be, anti-war, and they're interested in human rights, and they somehow manage then to get into total hostility to the existing government in Syria and embrace these extremist groups that obviously are not interested in democracy, but they somehow they bring out this hostility. You got to stay with us. I hope we've got a break of about 4 minutes for some commercials, and then we'll be back in a second. Can you stay?
Sounds good. I'll be around.
Welcome back to World Crisis Radio. Webster Tarpley here in Washington, D.C. It's our post-election broadcast, Friday the 8th of November. I'm inviting everybody, go to C-SPAN, take a look at my lecture on the Russian fleets of 1863, and maybe we'll get that broadcast on C-SPAN 3 one of these weekends to counteract the clouds of error that have been spread by some brand X historians. But now we're going directly into the thick of the Syrian issue. We're very happy to continue to be joined by Paul LaRoude of the Syria Solidarity Movement. That's a website you can find. The sponsors, the organizers in a general sense of the North American tour of Sister Agnes Mariam of the Cross. Right, she is she's the head of certainly it's a Melkite Catholic monastery convent in Kara, Syria, about halfway between Damascus and Homs. I know her, very fine person, true humanitarian, wants peace, reconciliation, and an end to this horrible civil war. So, Paul LaRoude, you're telling us now this was last night. It was the Oakland Peace Center. Where does it go from here, and how can people get ready in the various places in the next week or 10 days?
She will be flying to Southern California tomorrow, and there are events tomorrow and Sunday in Southern California. She's going to be staying on in Southern California for an additional 2 days for private meetings, and then she's flying on on the 13th, she's flying to Cleveland, and they have a very full schedule, apparently, for her in Cleveland on the 14th and 15th. And there should be a lot of publicity because the news media are really turning out for it. Then on the 16th, she flies to Denver, and they have an event that evening. The Northwood Presbyterian Church, I think it is. Anyway, you can see it. You can find it at the calendar online. And the following day, there's another event, and also, I believe, an interview. I think it's a television interview. I'm not sure. And then that evening, she flies to Lincoln, Nebraska. That's the 17th. On the 18th, she'll have some events in Lincoln, and on the 19th, she flies to the UK. Well, actually, first to Toronto, and she catches a flight from there to the UK, where she will be until the 30th, including possibly a trip to Rome during that time to meet with a delegation to the Pope.
If you want to go through some of those locations in Britain, we have quite a few listeners over in the UK, so if you want to just tick them off, please do.
Yeah, actually, I don't have that itinerary. It's the UK Organizing Committee that's doing that. I'd be happy to put you in touch with them. But but anyway, she'll be flying back to Toronto on the 30th of November, and her first event is on December 1st there, and she'll have about 5 days of events in Canada, and then on the 6th and 7th of December, she will be in New York City, and we expect a very full schedule and lots of stuff going on in New York, and probably some large crowds as well. And then she flies into Washington on the 8th. We don't yet have an event on the evening of the 8th, but Monday and Tuesday, we're going to get as many visits as possible to the Hill and possibly other governmental contacts while she's there.
Right. Now, I'm interested in the last part, because I can help you with quite a bit of that, right? And you want to obviously maximize the number of congressional appointments, right? And you got to look in some strange quarters, right? You're going to be surprised the people that are going to be interested, right? Not all, of one stripe or another. But certainly here, if you're going to come to Washington, D.C., you've got to have an event at the National Press Club, and we can certainly work on that. And then we've also got, there is an activist community here. Washington, D.C. is unlike some other places, right? Politics here is a business. People do it for money.
Right.
There are a lot of mercenaries. But there are also people who are concerned with, idealistic humanitarian issues of peace and so forth. So I think I'm in touch with a lot of those. So I hope we can work together, because I think we can fill that part out. And indeed, between New York and Washington, I think national media, network television, big cable television should be highly interested. Right, the State Department obviously is not happy, but they don't rule the world either. So we'll push ahead.
Yeah, I'm hoping that the preceding events, will build to a kind of crescendo at that point, and then she'll have better access, and there'll be demand for her, and so forth. So anyway, but that's her last stop in the U.S., and she'll be leaving on the 11th to go back to Lebanon. I fully expect that it's very likely that there'll be another tour in the new year, perhaps in the spring, because already the demand is outstripping her current schedule.
Good. I would recommend to people, there's an interview of Sister Agnes Mariam with Peter Phillips and Mickey Huff of the Project Censored. You have that on your website, right? Syrian Solidarity Movement. Correct. And there, in about half an hour, you get a summary of the analysis, at least the general outlines of what she has to say. And I think that's something that certainly deserves to be heard. We here have tried very hard to put out her study, right? The detailed refutation of the faked or manipulated videos that were used after August 21st to try to start a general war, and thank goodness that fell through. But in the time we have left, Why don't you tell us a little bit about yourself and a little bit about the Syrian Solidarity Network and how you came to this?
Last night, one of the skeptics, one of the questions was about how where our income is coming from for the trip. And I should say that this is entirely a grassroots operation. The money came by asking every event to chip in to the overseas costs and the shared costs, and then to fully fund the local costs, including the airfare to the city where they're flying. So this was entirely funded locally, and typically they weren't even out of pocket on it because they're getting reimbursed by passing the hat at the events themselves, and it covers it. So anyway, to dispel that. Now, about where this started was with conferences and things that happened last year that got us in touch with Syrian nonviolent groups and so forth, and a delegation was created to go to Syria last August. Then, and I was asked to invite Maria McGuire, and I did. She turned us down at that time, but that was because she was already working on another delegation with Mother Agnes Mariam, and she was putting together this delegation, and I was one of the people that was invited to go on it. So it was supposed to take place in February, but we went in May, and out of that came the impetus for this movement and to bring Mother Agnes's message here.
You could just hang on 1 second. The music is our hard break. We'll just get a couple of more minutes in the next segment if you can hang on, and then we'll let you go. Welcome back to World Crisis Radio. Just a couple of more minutes with Paul Larudi of the Syria Solidarity Movement. They are, generally speaking, coordinating, I guess we can say, the visit by Sister Mother Agnès Mariam de la Croix from the monastery of St. James in Kara, Syria. And she, of course, is one of perhaps the leading world humanitarian Irenic spokespersons looking for a concord, right? Looking for a policy of political solution through negotiation. It's the Masala movement. Can you tell us a couple of words about that?
Yes. In fact, she does not describe it as political. She describes it as non-political.
Okay.
Because it is on the basis of reconciliation among anybody who's fighting with each other. But it is a Syrian movement, and it rejects the interference of foreign powers or foreigners in general in the process. And you can see on our website for an example of a success in this in Mu'addamiyah, where they evacuated 7,000 really suffering refugees through a negotiation that she personally made between hardline, you can call them affiliates of Al-Qaeda, some of them, and the Syrian government. And the remarkable thing was that they allowed her to come into their headquarters and talk with them, and it was very cordial. And then on the way out, they escorted them to the place where the army was, and there you had soldiers and these hardcore rebels, conversing together, shaking hands, and the soldiers offering them cigarettes. And so it's this is what she's talking about. She's often accused of being pro-Assad because she's not anti-Assad, and she does go into Assad Syrian government offices, and for the purpose that she tries to maintain good relations with everybody. So this is, she tries to solve problems, basically, is what it's about. And if this can grow widely enough, she thinks that it could be a solution to the problem.
All right, wonderful. I would just say that if you look on the Internet, you're going to find the wildest, most unbelievable charges against her. One of them, I think, is a guy by the name of Weiss, has come up with a screed where he invents various charges to hurl at Sister Agnes Mariam, and that guy is his track record is that he's a warmonger. He's a neocon. He's concerned with the Israeli security needs, and this is how he expresses it. Let me just ask you one last thing now. Suppose I'm interested, right? This Agnes Mariam is a person of massive moral integrity and really world historical status. I often thought if Joan of Arc were here in our time, would look something like Sister Agnes Mariam, I think. So if they want to help with the financing, if they want to aid your group, can you tell them how to get in touch with you?
The simplest way is to go to the website. The donate page there has information about how to send it by check or to donate directly through the PayPal link that's there. And we are a 501c3 nonprofit, so that all donations are tax exempt. So, and also you can communicate with us through the website. So you're most welcome to do that. And
all right, great. I hope people will do that because this is something that should be essentially everywhere. To counteract, frankly, the very, very distorted picture that we've had through the various media, the State Department, and indeed these left gatekeepers. Right, I have to mention Amy Goodman of Democracy Now! And people like this who have really not told the truth about what's going on in Syria. So let me thank Paul Larudi. Can we get you back next week for an update?
For sure. And once again, that website is SyriaSolidarityMovement.org.
Okay, SyriaSolidarityMovement.org. And we look forward to hearing more next week about all the things going on in Los Angeles, I guess, and
sure,
and related parts. Thank you so much for coming on. Best of luck to you. And please give our best salutations to Sister Agnes Mariam.
Will do. Thank you very much, Webster.
Okay. See you soon then. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.
All right. So there you have it. That is, as I mentioned last week, right, we've got these stories that Saudi Arabia is so unhappy with the fact that Obama did not bomb Syria, that Saudi Arabia is now getting set to do their own things. And what will that look like? They're going to give advanced surface-to-air missiles to the death squads, right, to the Nusra al-Qaeda cannibal forces inside Syria. And if they give these advanced surface-to-air missiles, right, man-pads, shoulder-held devices, those can be used to bring down Syrian military aircraft, but also any kind of civilian airliner, be it Lebanese, Israeli, Turkish, Jordanian, you name it. And then when that happens, guess what's going to happen? There's going to be an attempt to blame that once again on Assad. So what we've got to do is recalibrate the outlook of people here in the Western world. So this is the opportunity to inoculate people against various kinds of war provocations that are still coming in. By the way, we don't have time to do justice to this week, but right now, Geneva, of course, very busy in Geneva. The Saudis are freaking out. The Israelis are freaking out. It looks like the Perm 5+1, that is the 5 permanent members, U.S., Britain, Russia, China, and France, +1, Germany, are getting close to some kind of a deal with Iran, and this would slow or freeze or somehow limit the progress of the Iranian enrichment program of uranium, but at the same time would loosen or relax these killer economic sanctions. And this might be then the prelude to a more ample negotiation process. We've got to move the Middle East back from the brink of an all-out war. So Kerry is there, Fabius is there, others are coming in. Netanyahu is freaking. He's on his own. The Saudis are freaking. They assembled the entire cohort of Saudi princes. I guess there must be about 1,500 of them, 2,000 of them, to tell Kerry that they were not happy. So they're also the Syrian peace talks. We'll be back in a minute on World Crisis Radio. Welcome back to World Crisis Radio. The one thing we would add to what we had to say about Geneva, right? So Geneva is hot corner, the U.S.-Iranian or PERM 5+1 Iranian talks going on, and there's still the effort to get the Syrian peace talks going. Russia has not given up on that. And the good news, Aleppo is now quite possibly about to be liberated. A key town near Aleppo has been retaken, liberated by the Syrian army and its allies, and that may be the key to Aleppo. The death squads may be about to be driven out of Aleppo, and their reign of terror inside Aleppo may be in its last throes. So let's now change gears again. I gave a quick summary of the New York vote, right, the outcome of the Critico-Tax Wall Street Party campaign. We're very happy once again to have Daniela Walls with us. Daniela, we're under a little bit of time pressure, but in this segment, we can devote to you, can you give us a quick summary? What happened in New York, and what does it mean for the rest of the United States?
Well, I'm glad you gave a rundown of what happened in New York. I can tell you a little bit more, but I wanted to start out by saying, how we're still in the embryonic phase of this party, and we're only a couple months old, and we're actually going to be making our debut in January of 2014, and that is when we are going to go national, and our candidates will announce their candidacies for Congress. We can't announce any candidates until January 2014, so now the party is still just in the rudimentary stages of building our foundation. At times, like it was in New York, it was treacherous running Randy in New York City without much organization or money and so quickly and right out of the gate. But it was a trial by fire, and we got comfortable, Webster, with how the electoral legal process works. So these next couple months, we have time now to lay the foundation and go national. Next year is going to be our first real test because we'll have multiple candidates running in multiple jurisdictions. I'm not sure. I wasn't sure if people knew how new all this stuff was. We just got our website up a few weeks before Tuesday's election in New York City, and we also built a couple weeks ago a social network for party founders. We need as many like-minded people and leaders to come aboard at this launching now. And like you say, Webster, it's time for the leaders to come out of the closet and, instead of making hand signals in the park, this time make it legal. We need to make our way into this corrupted system and uncorrupted. People can organize a legal party branch in their state and help somebody run for office or run for office themselves. And this is what leadership is. Doing everything against the system and bashing the system is sort of juvenile and passé at this point. And I think it's time for the right ideas to get in the system. We are also interested in alliances and coalitions. If you have an organization, but you need the component of a solid economic program, maybe to second what you are advocating, then please contact us at our website at taxwallstreetparty.org. And please take the time to read our platform again. We're also, Webster, I just wanted to say, too, we're currently recruiting candidates to run in the 2014 midterm elections for either statewide office, U.S. Congress, or a state legislative seat. We have 4 or 5 strong prospects at the moment for Congress, U.S. House and the U.S. Senate. So if anyone has an interest or knows of anyone in your state or congressional district who would be interested in running on the Tax Wall Street Party, we would like to hear from you as soon as possible so we can develop a strategy for you to gain ballot access. In every state, ballot access requirements are different. There are different deadlines in every state. There are different dates when you can start petitioning, and signature requirements vary from state to state. We also need to discuss as soon as possible with potential candidates other requirements such as how they are registered to vote. For instance, in some states you cannot be registered as a Democrat or Republican if you plan to run as a minor party candidate. By the end of this year, 2013, you would need to have switched. If you wait till January 7th, Webster, to switch your voter registration, the state will say you are ineligible to run on the Tax Wall Street Party. There are also residency requirements. There's a lot of quirky rules regarding candidacy, so this is why it would be nice if candidates would get in touch with us now. And again, you can contact us through the website, taxwallstreetparty.org, or email me at taxwallstreetparty@gmail. And the founder site is also very important. We have programmers to help build us that social network as a place to discuss future strategies and plans. And the network includes individual state organizations so that members can discuss things relevant to the party with other members of their state. So email me for an invitation. And then a little bit about what happened on Tuesday. In New York City, my take on it is that the establishment won. The establishment won big. You can make a pretty strong case that de Blasio is nothing but the entire establishment, Webster. He's the real estate establishment, Wall Street, the SEIU. The establishment won on Tuesday. Nothing good really happened.
But of course, since he has to operate under this left cover, it's just a question of time before he begins to be perceived as attacking his own base. He's going to renege on stop and frisk. He's going to act as the fiscal conservative that he proclaimed himself to be. In other words, this is now very unstable, right? Bloomberg was a reactionary. Everybody knew it. He's a Wall Street thug. Nothing new. This de Blasio is supposed to be the angel of progressive renaissance in New York, and when it's clear that he's not, that sets the stage for a blow-up.
It's not. It won't be long before he disappoints. The results were a little discouraging for all the third parties, as their vote totals were lower than they'd ever been before. And this election was discouraging for every third party involved. I was even looking at the city council races in New York, even in races where it was only one-on-one, like a Democrat with an independent, where the Republicans didn't field a candidate, they got wiped out too, meaning... Anyway, in those cases, the independent would usually get at least 10, 20, 30%. In this case, they were getting 1, 2, and 3%. So Tuesday was all status quo. De Blasio, like you said, is not going to come in now and make any earth-shattering changes. And nothing new happened. De Blasio was expected to win. New York City is an overwhelmingly Democratic city because of Bloomberg's wealth and New York City's high crime rate in the early 90s. That led to aberrations, Giuliani and Bloomberg, but nothing unusual happened in New York City on Election Day. It was, solidly blue city, and they elected somebody who was like Obama in a lot of ways. Unlike, other Democratic candidates, he did need to be sold as more progressive. But as far as any implications when he begins to govern, nothing's going to change. Wall Street is going to keep on the same as they've always kept on. The financial oligarchs will be running everything. There isn't
okay, but look, let's also, there's a bright side. You look at this city, right, with all, it's 90% Democratic or whatever it is. Still, the Democratic Party could not elect anybody after Dinkins in 1989. So we've had about a quarter century of the naked dictatorship of finance capital. Now we've gone to the camouflaged dictatorship of finance capital, and I would call that a minor step forward. In other words, I think it's a hopeful sign. It shows that you can't just go with a straight, reactionary in your face. It's got to be somebody who's going to fake it. And if you look at de Blasio's left cover compared to Obama's, de Blasio is way further left, right? Obama was a neoliberal, bipartisan, all this other stuff, right? De Blasio is substantially different.
They're having to camouflage it more and more, which is a good sign. Because when they can't go any further and it busts apart, then people are going to have to take a harder look at what's going on.
We may have a mass strike in New York City next spring. I think that's the working hypothesis.
Well, that would be good, and we need to be there with the Tax Wall Street Party.
Exactly, with program, right? Because nobody else is going to bring program.
Not let the... So are we done today, Webster? Should I say goodbye?
We can give you a couple of more minutes if you have something of earth-shaking importance. Come back in a couple of seconds and give us the contact information, and we'll be moving on again next week. Back in a minute on World Crisis Radio. Welcome back to World Crisis Radio. I realize this is now our last segment. Daniela, why don't you just quickly give your contact information, people interested in the Founders site, interested in exploring possibilities of running for office, how the Tax Wall Street Party can help people to realize their political dreams, ambitions, and serve the country.
Okay, well, you can contact us through the website at taxwallstreetparty.org or email me directly at taxwallstreetparty@gmail. And if you want to be invited to the Founders Social Network, send me your email at taxwallstreetparty@gmail, and I'll send you a personal invitation because it's an invite-only site. And you were talking about the upsurge of a new Occupy at the end of 2014 that's being talked about. And we were talking about, who is going to dominate this. Is it going to be the Assange, the Snowdens, the Russell Brands, or finally a program? And
right.
Our goal, or my aim, is to have Tax Wall Street Party step in almost where Occupy fell short, offering our program and a party and a practical way to have our demands met by electing people. We have to do, almost what the Tea Party did and make it into the political arena. Some of my friends think I'm naive to work within the system. They've gone that Occupy route where they think, things are so far gone and that the whole thing needs to be scrapped and we need to invent a totally new system. And I spent a lot of time thinking that way too, Webster, and I used to run around saying, don't vote like Russell Brand just did. But I saw that while I was busy, I did. I grew up. But I saw that while I was busy running around advocating for nothing, every other faction, Webster, I was against was busy taking power. So instead of voting or not voting, there's a third option, which is to find a minor party candidate that you believe in and support them all the way.
And remember, we got to wrap up now, but the voting is the least of it. The voting is simply the prelude to intervening in a mass strike wave to provide leadership, program, organization, and direction so that you win, right? Mm-hmm. As we said, there's no Occupy Wall Street faction in the House of Representatives or the Senate or governors or mayors. There's nothing. They got absolutely nothing. For all the Sturm und Drang, they came up empty. The Tea Party is sitting there with 70 or 80 lunatics in the House of Representatives. This kind of asymmetry has to end. Anyway, thank you, Daniela.
Well, we have 5 candidates. We have 5 candidates coming up for Congress.
Good,
so
and hopefully we'll have more. We'll see as we go into the hot stove league now. We'll have more. Thank you so much, Daniela. Come back next week. We'll have more time. We had to do Sister Agnes Mariam today. Okay?
Oh, wonderful. No problem. Bye-bye.
See you soon.
Thank you.
Now, I just want to give you some headlines now because we're down to the last minutes. Ron Paul gave the kiss of death to Cuccinelli. Nullification. Remember, all that stuff with nullification, interposition, and secessionism is poison among patriotic Americans, and that's how the Federalist Party was destroyed in 1814, 1815. They flirted with secessionism. That was the end of them. I call your attention to the Roger Stone documentary Pandora's Secret, which was on CNN yesterday. This certainly shows the benighted ignorance, the hysteria of the green, anti-technology, anti-progress, anti-science mob. The portrait that they gave of Helen Caldecott, I think, captured her superficiality, her bluster, her profound ignorance, her rage and irascibility. The representative they had on there from the National Resources Defense Council was pathetic. She said, this is not 1970s hysteria. That's exactly what it is. And the tragedy is that people have been dying in the third world for lack of cheap, abundant power. And don't tell us that windmills and solar cells are going to do it. This is simply a bad joke. There's there's not enough land on Earth to go with those things. So we also want to be aware, as I said, Aleppo about to be liberated. And Daniela mentioned this Russell Brand. Now, this character, this decadent individual, I knew very little of him, but what we see is the hyperactivity of British intelligence, right? We had Snowden, Assange, Greenwald, and now they were getting a lot of publicity from The Guardian, of course, right? Notice Snowden, Assange, Greenwald, they told you nothing about the operations against Syria, nothing about the operations against Egypt or Libya, nothing about the Arab Spring, nothing about what was going on with the CIA backing the Muslim Brotherhood. There was nothing about the Israelis. There are no ongoing operations that were blown by these so-called Snowden, Assange revelations. And now we've got, instead of the Guardian, or competing with the Guardian to be the Pravda of the world revolution, we've now got the New Statesman, ultra-left organ of the British financial and spook community, and they're pushing this character, Russell Brand, who obviously he thinks he's a mixture of Che and Jesus Christ. He's obviously a narcissist, and he's telling us about revolution, that it's revolutionary not to vote, but it's revolutionary to go for the total consciousness revolution. There's nothing more tired and hackneyed and shop-worn than these idiotic slogans. All of them have been recycled from France, May 1968, when they were used by NATO to try to destabilize General de Gaulle and open the way to bigger and better U.S. domination of Europe. And notice, when you get somebody of this ilk, right, somebody from the entertainment world, it's the Situationist International. We can smell ad busters, this vaguely radical chic, vaguely pornographic, vaguely substance abusing world, maybe not so vague, maybe more explicit. So that's all going on. Remember, if you want to tell a limited hangout, one of the big signs is the Damascus Road conversion of the person, right? That the person becomes an immediate celebrity. They do so when other whistleblowers are ignored, people who are coming with hotter and more important stuff. They don't get any traction. They tell you nothing new, and they tell you nothing about the big issues, nothing about the JFK assassination, 9/11, the Arab Spring, these other operations. And instead, they prepare more covert ops, right? Pentagon Papers prepare Watergate. Assange prepares the Arab Spring. What is Snowden preparing? An attempt to, what? It was obviously to try to save the Syrian rebels, to put the U.S. on a weak footing vis-a-vis Britain and France. And now Russell Brand, what is he preparing? So all these things going on. And remember, as we pointed out at the beginning, we're going through these party realignments, right? There was a 1932 to 1968 New Deal phase. It was destroyed by the Vietnam War. There was a 1968 to 2008 reactionary phase, the Southern strategy, dominated by Southern states, veterans, old people, racists, white men, rural, small town, petty bourgeois voters, neocons, Christian fundamentalists. That has blown up. That was blown up by the Iraq War and the crash of 2008. So now we're in the early phases of a new party realignment, but these structures take a while to shift. So we're when you see things like interestingly in New York, right, the first time the Democrats have been able to elect a mayor since 1989, or the fact that in Virginia it's the first time since 1973, I believe, that the White House party has also been able to win the governorship in Richmond. Or another one is it's the first time since the 1880s that a political party has not been able to hold the governorship in Virginia for 2 terms, at least, in a row. So you're seeing all of these monumental events that are going by, and what it shows is that the old order of 1968 to 2008 is shifting. I would say this Pandora's Secret, right, on CNN, right, an attempt now to return to what amounts to science. In other words, to go back to the pre-1968 paradigm, science, technology, industry, progress, improvements in the cultural and material lot of humanity. That, I think, is a step in the right direction. And the merciless exposure of the hypocrisy and stupidity and hysteria of these green spokesmen, I think, was quite an interesting feature. So I guess that's all of our time for today. We'll see you next week. Watch out for those food stamp cuts. They're hitting right in advance of Thanksgiving. That is a crime. We want to roll that stuff back, roll back the sequester, and we'll be fighting for that next week on World Crisis Radio. Abortion and gays and contraception and other issues. We don't care about that. Those are rube-based. That's to get the yokels on board, but that's not really what we're about. We're about union busting, tax cuts for the rich, deregulation, and so forth. And they look at Cuccinelli and they say, your record is wanting. You've wasted too much time on the rube bait. In other words, you've somehow become confused. The rube bait is the cover story for the reactionary union busting and related policies. It's not a goal in itself. So a lot of them refuse to give money to Cuccinelli. He goes down to defeat. And this was a rather interesting result. Now, the other thing, so this means the Republican Party in big trouble, because if that four-way alliance can't be maintained, the Republicans collapse. They've got to have the money element and the social bigot element. The social bigots are their ground troops. If they don't have them, then they can't win elections. The warmongers, not enough. The stoners and anarchists, also not enough. So it's very definitely a tremendous crisis for the Republican Party. Could lead to their destruction. We'll be watching. Back in a minute. Welcome back to World Crisis Radio. Asking you once again, kindly please go to C-SPAN website on the Internet. Click on, feed in Tarpley, Russia, and you'll get to this speech of mine from the Press Club, 24th of September, about the Russian fleets. Click on that, watch it for a while. It's now number 8 in overall popularity on the website, and if it goes higher, a good chance it might get rebroadcast to be able to refute the, I think, distorted picture that's being offered by Perino and certainly other existing portrayals of these events on C-SPAN. So the Brand X history needs to be countered. So please don't forget that. So repudiation of the Tea Party. Tea Party defeated everywhere. Left turn in mass psychology. Now, I'd be the first one to say, look at de Blasio in New York, right? This is not a real step forward. It's a faker who operates under left cover, and more explicit left cover by far than Obama. Welcome to this week's edition of World Crisis Radio. This is Webster Tarpley reporting from Washington, D.C. First of all, a program note. My lecture on the Russian fleets of 1863 and how Tsar Alexander II helped Abraham Lincoln save the Union in that hour of dire peril. That broadcast was, of course, put on C-SPAN television in the past couple of weeks, but it's now in the running on the C-SPAN website. That is to say, C-SPAN video.org. Anyway, you just go to C-SPAN and you get to it. The C-SPAN video library, and if you just scroll down a little bit, you'll see that we have the most watched programs of recent days, and I'm very happy to say that the speech that I gave at the National Press Club on September 24th, Russia's participation in the U.S. Civil War, is now available there as number 8, the 8th most popular of all of the most watched. In other words, of the people now going to the C-SPAN website, I believe, yes, the website, it is the 8th most popular. It is the most popular of anything appearing on C-SPAN 3. And the only other historical one is one about Mamie Eisenhower, which counts as a C-SPAN special. So I thank all of you who have clicked in there and helped to project this up to the 8th position. And I ask you now, if you have a minute during the weekend, go to C-SPAN, go to the C-SPAN video library, take a look at the most watched, click over to the second set of those, and you will see that my talk is there, number 8. Just click on it, watch it, review it, rehear it if you have time. And this I ask because it would be highly advisable for this to be rebroadcast, especially to dissipate the unfortunately hideous features of some of these individuals, to be sure. That's a left turn. In other words, it means that the forces of reaction, the Koch brothers, the National Rifle Association, the Dement machine, the forces of Cruz, and so forth, the so-called libertarians, the reactionaries of Rand Paul and Ron Paul, all of them are defeated and in disarray. In particular, inside the Republican Party, we've now got open war, and it's this four-way division of the Republicans. You'll recall it now. The legions of greed, the Wall Street and corporate money men, the social bigots, they like to call themselves Christian evangelicals. I don't see anything Christian about them. The warmongers, the neocons, and then the libertarians, obviously starting with the stoners, right, the people interested in narcotics, but then getting into this very ugly right-wing anarchist anti-government phenomenon that we've seen in the government shutdown and the attempt to bankrupt the United States with the debt ceiling. There's now war among these, and in particular, it's that the legions of greed look at the libertarian anarchists and say, you almost bankrupted my predatory derivatives interests, right? If you had pulled your shenanigans with the debt ceiling and bankrupted the United States, I'd be wearing a barrel because I would have lost on all my shorts and my longs, and that would have been an upheaval. So the legions of greed look at these right-wing anarchists of the Cruz, Dement, and related types, Amash, whatever his name is, Rand Paul even. They look at them as an existential threat. In other words, they're destroying the racket of these predatory money men, and there's not much to choose between them, is there? They're both forces of chaos. Perhaps the anarchists, the chaos element is a little bit more immediate. The other thing is that the legions of greed are not happy with the social bigots. This came to the fore in Virginia. The money people in Northern Virginia and elsewhere looked at Cuccinelli, social bigot, and said, look, you're going to be running around worrying about abortion, right? But way over left. But, of course, a faker controlled by Soros, Morgan Stanley, Goldman Sachs, you name it. But to the average person, this is a left turn. So certainly E.J. Dionne in the Washington Post of yesterday, a nudge to the left. The center of gravity in American politics moved left in Tuesday's off-year election. No doubt about it. And in terms of mass psychology, certainly that's true. The reactionary Republican machine is crumbling. The legions of greed are at war with the libertarian stoner anarchist faction who want to destroy the government. And in another fundamental way, the legions of greed are at war with the social bigots who don't want to pay enough attention to the money needs of the money men. They want to go out chasing their ideological chimeras about homosexuality and abortion, right? Guns, God, gays, and abortion, right? Those great wedge issues. That's what they are. That's what those guys want to do. The money men say, no, pay attention to our money needs. So that can blow them up, and we're hoping that this will now play itself out. There's already it's like the German army in 1918. There's a stab-in-the-back legend among the Cuccinelli reactionary Tea Party supporters. They say, oh, the money men let us down. They should have given us more money. We could have won. Dubious, right? This is the Virginia Republican Party who ran what can only be described as a war on women. We'll try to get to that in a minute. Now, there are also, the other, of course, the big thing, the Tax Wall Street Party is on the map. Randy Credico, the Tax Wall Street Party in New York City, went all the way to November, got 12,000 votes back in on September 10th in the Democratic Party primary. This time, of course, it's more difficult to get people to experiment with a protest vote when they're facing this ogre Laude. Laude scared a lot of people, right? The prospect of another 4 years of dictatorship of finance capital as we've had it under Giuliani and then under Bloomberg. That was scary. So Credico was cut down in the effect of the Perino study, right? The Perino study of Lincoln, which does not accord the necessary emphasis to the critical Russian alliance, which is what made Lincoln's victory in the Civil War possible. Without that, you would have had Britain and France coming in on the side of the Confederacy and a very, very difficult situation. Slavery, most likely, would have dominated in at least much of the Western Hemisphere, certainly from the Mason-Dixon line to the South Pole. That would likely have been all slave at the by about 1870. So that didn't happen thanks to the Russian fleet. So Russia's participation. If you want to just go to C-SPAN, click on Tarpley, and then look for Russia. You can get the same thing. So that's C-SPAN. That's a light here in this unfortunate overall situation. Although we've got now some positive news. The U.S. election, obviously a very mixed bag. How could it be otherwise? But positive results to be sure. First of all, we're now referring to all the mayoral elections, the Virginia, New Jersey elections, the New York City elections, and so forth. First thing we can say is the Tea Party has been repudiated everywhere. All important races, the Tea Party has lost. The only possible exception is Attorney General in Virginia, which is now locked in a too-close-to-call recount. There, the Tea Party fanatic, the social bigot, Obenshine, had a big lead early in the evening, but it didn't last. And as the Northern Virginia suburbs came in, it became neck and neck, and it's now a virtual tie. There will be a recount that may take weeks or even months before the winner is known. So as of today, we can say the Tea Party fanatics were turned back everywhere. They were repudiated. They were rebuffed. They were routed. The other thing we can say is that there is a definite left turn in mass psychology. We'll go through this in a minute, but when we get a trade unionist in Boston, an ultra-left in New York, a Clintonista in Virginia, and so on down the line, apart from